Welcome, friends. I was in 4th grade when I picked up a book that my brother, who was a sophomore in high school, had left lying around the living room. He moved it from one end table to another to try to convince my parents he was actually reading this assigned book. He had not read a single page, but I was so fascinated by the cover that I picked it up and read it secretly every chance I could, at which point my brother tried to pump me for information so he could write his paper. I think our sister ratted us out because he got in trouble for that. The book was about Auschwitz. That's an entirely inappropriate book for a 4th grader. But it was the start of my lifelong passion for history. There were many words I did not understand, and the content of the book, of course, shocked me. Human hair used to stuff pillowcases, gold teeth pulled from corpses, gas chambers, the ovens. But the book was also inspiring because the author included the stories of survival, the many Jewish inmates who refused to allow Hitler's Germany to erase their existence or steal their humanity. That's what I fell in love with and what I wanted to learn more about. When I started college at the age of 26, after serving in the Army, getting married, having some kids, most of my history professors at both the bachelor's and master's level were crusty old white men nearing retirement. These older gentlemen stood in front of a classroom coughing because they had smoked a cigarette on their way to class, but still they lectured in an engaging fashion that continued to feed my love of history. It was the younger professors and the one woman among the history faculty at New Mexico State University who showed me what history could be. That it was not just, as some of our students complain, about a bunch of dead people. Those younger professors demonstrated that history is more than the founding fathers and wars and presidents, as important as those topics are. I learned about labor history from Dr. Brown, about the human impact of the Great Depression from Dr. Matre, about Latin American history from Dr. Harris, who spent every summer of his childhood with his mother's family in Mexico. And I learned from my mentor, Dr. Joan Jensen, one of the first generation of women historians who helped lead the way to our understanding of women's history, a professor who kept an old butter churn filled with sand in her office and made every student sit at that churn when they came to ask her a question, and they were forced to churn for the entire time it took for her to answer. And historians, folks, do not say in 50 words what we can say in 500. It is the most unique way I have ever seen to cut down on student drop-off visits. Thanks to these really wonderful historians, I went into a PhD program wanting to someday teach at the college level. There were a considerable number of bumps in the road. I faced yet another batch of old school professors who believed, as one confessed to me, that women were not smart enough to earn better than a B in his classes. I got an A-, so I won. Another told me that women could not study and write about women's history because we were unable to be, in his words, objective. I asked if that meant men could not be objective when they wrote their history. Those of you that know me know that I have absolutely no filter. There were many, many, many more instances when the female graduate students were questioned about our fitness for higher education. Way too many stories to share in just 15 minutes. So, here we are. I have taught at Anderson University for 30 years, the first 3 as an adjunct until 1999, and now as an adjunct again, semi-retired, starting as of this past January. 70 years of life, 44 of those years studying and or teaching history. I have filled in my life roles and responsibilities as a researcher, a scholar, a teacher, a veteran, a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and as an American citizen who deeply, deeply loves her country, warts and all. All of those roles reflect my personal story, my history, and have reinforced why I believe all of us, including our students, should be required to take a history class for more than just the very important critical thinking and communication skills. Firstly, understanding history makes us more informed citizens. Of course it does. Every American history textbook that I know of has appendices that include the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution and all of its amendments, and various other documents that illuminate who we are as a people and how we got where we are today. These documents remind us, unfortunately, that all men were not equal, that we needed the 13th Amendment to end slavery, and a 19th Amendment recognizing women's right to vote. Learning the history of our country and of our world brings us to an understanding of cause and effect, that our actions today have an impact years and decades later. Studying history helps us to value what matters and what does not, to see the humanity of those who do not look or sound or believe the same way that we do. Historical knowledge can highlight what worked, what failed, and perhaps what we might do to fix the problems we face as a nation, as a world, and as a community today. Secondly, learning history helps us to develop empathy for those whose stories do not match our own. I have always told my students that they will learn the good, the bad, and the ugly of history in my classes, that they are not responsible for the actions and attitudes of any previous generations, but that it is incumbent on all of us to understand the lived experiences of others. I share with them the emotions I experienced as a child, watching on television as African American teenagers, the same ages as my siblings, peacefully marching, but being attacked with water from the high-pressure fire hoses in Birmingham, Alabama, simply because of the color of their skin. I tell them about children like my father, who picked up cigarette butts and smoked what was left of them during the Great Depression, because it helped alleviate the hunger pangs. I tell them the struggles of women in the United States who simply wanted a voice and had to work for 72 years to gain that right to vote. I want my students to know about Japanese American internment camps during World War II, about Mississippi appendectomies performed secretly on African American women in the South, and if you don't know what that is, you need to take a history course. I want them to know that labor laws and safety standards in the workplace only happened after hardworking men and women, often very young and often immigrants, were killed by fires or mine cave-ins or steel mill furnaces blowing up. I want them to understand the impossible situations of women like my grandmother, who was married at 14, widowed at 16, with a 2-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old baby, my mother, unable to read or write, whose now deceased husband had left no life insurance. There was no one to help watch her children so she could work, but there were also no jobs available in her area of Appalachia, and the Great Depression was just 1 year away. If we want to understand the depths of poverty, or dangers in the workplace, or the challenges of crossing the Great Plains to become homesteaders, we have to learn our history. Because history does not repeat itself, but it does often rhyme. And if we can have empathy for those in the past who faced difficult circumstances and hardship, perhaps we can have a greater understanding of someone sitting next to us in the classroom, or participating in a protest march, or standing on the corner with a cardboard sign saying, "I'm a veteran, please help." I'm not a biblical scholar, and I never claimed to be. But I know that being a Christian requires me to have empathy for all creatures, great and small, human or otherwise. History, more than anything else I have encountered in my life, helped me to understand the importance of empathy. As noted historian David McCullough once stated, history shows us how to behave. We cannot erase it. And finally, history can inspire us. As I pondered what I would say today, I talked to my second oldest daughter, Joanna, who hates being called the middle child, who graduated from Anderson University in 2002 with a double major in history and psychology. She shared something with me that she had posted on Facebook. With her permission, I'm sharing part of her words with you. Quote, Anthony, Chavez, Douglas, Johnson, Keller, Kennedy, King, Lynn, Lincoln, Obama, Owens, Parks, Ryde, Robinson, Roosevelt, Theodore Franklin and Eleanor, Sacagawea, Sitting Bull, Stanton, Tecumseh, Truth, Tubman, Washington. What do all of these names have in common? Not race, not gender, not generation, not any other social identifier. They were flawed. They were, in some cases, broken. They were regular people, just like you and me. But these are now the names of some of the greatest inspirational leaders in American history, People who saw a need or a problem and rose up to meet it head first. People who cared about our nation, about our fellow man and woman, about the greater good. They led by example. They showed us how to do better, how to be better, how to rise up in the face of adversity, how to lift others up alongside ourselves. They taught generations of children that you can achieve great things, that you don't have to accept the status quo, that you can dream big, end of quote. Most of us will not find our name in the history books, but that does not make our stories any less important. Most of us know about Ruby Bridges, a very brave little 6-year-old girl who was the first to desegregate an elementary school in New Orleans. Few know the name of Barbara Henry, the lone educator who volunteered to be Ruby's teacher. The soiled doves out west, working in dangerous saloons and dance halls and brothels, were shunned by polite society, but they were also instrumental in the start of fire departments in their towns. Clara Lemlich was a young Polish immigrant woman who spoke no English, who worked in the sweatshops of New York City in the early 20th century. She was a leader in the strikes to bring about safety standards in the factories. She's not in the history books. It's our passion, our calling, and our responsibility as historians to shine a light also on the lives of those not found in the textbooks. That's where we find people like me and you. That is why I wanted to become a college educator. All of us have a personal story to tell, and our stories are as integral to the history of our country as the lives of Washington and Lincoln and other famous figures. The grandfather of one of my former students was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. Another's grandfather was stationed on the USS Arizona when it was hit on December 7, 1941. He did not survive. But the lives of both of those men inspired the grandsons, whether they ever met them or not, to think big, to dream big. Their stories matter. And then there's the history of a little girl who read recipes and stories out loud to her grandmother while she cooked dinner, a child who did not know that her grandmother was illiterate or that she had been widowed at the age of 16 and struggled to feed her children during the Great Depression. She only knew that her grandmother wanted her to practice reading. My grandmother's name was Sarah Mitchell, nicknamed Scotty because she was so tight with money she could squeeze a penny until it turned into a dime. My apologies to President Moats and anybody else who has the name Scott in their name. She raised a family which grew to include 6 children and 20 grandchildren, and I can't even count the number of great-grandchildren. All but one of those combined 26 family members, all but one graduated high school. At least 6 served in the military, and almost half went to college. Scotty was not a very good cook, but she tried. She did not bake cookies like other grandmothers, but she taught her grandchildren how to gamble. And she instilled this granddaughter, who read to her, a passion for the written word. So much so that at the age of 10, I was ready to pick up and read a book about the Holocaust. My grandmother's simple request started me on a path that I could not and she could not have imagined. Very simply, my dream to teach history began because Scotty first asked me to read to her and because my lazy brother left a book lying around. So thank you, friends, for 30 years of encouragement, for your love, for your support. Thank you for being my family. And if you get bored and you need to talk, give me a call. We'll go out to lunch. Thank you.